Hello guys, welcome back to the channel, welcome back to the garage, welcome back to working on the race truck. But today is a very exciting day, the day we've been waiting for, the reason we really haven't had many videos up, and that's because our transmission is back from the guys at Muldoon's and our torque converter is back from the guys at Suncoast. So the guys at Suncoast sent the converter back, had no issues in there, just some clutch material. So the issue with the transmission, we didn't have any hard part failures, which is awesome. So the problem we ended up having with the transmission, if you remember at the track, the truck was going down the track, it shifted from 2 to 3 and it went to neutral, but we still had drive. So then we went back to the pits. I was getting ready to load it on the trailer, no reverse. You guys saw it getting it here in the garage. We didn't have reverse, couldn't pull it off the trailer. So took it to John, the guys at Muldoon's. Let's check this thing out, go over it, see what our failure was and all that. So they pulled it all apart, and here are direct drum clutches, which would be third gear, burn up. So that makes perfect sense because the direct drum is applied, like I said, in third gear, but it is also applied in reverse. So that really makes sense. Well, obviously it makes sense because that's what happened. But so that's why we didn't have third gear and why we didn't have reverse. So when they got to pulling the drum apart, here's what they found.
Seal tour. There's your failure.
So as you guys can see, the reason that clutch drum, or those clutches in the drum, burn up, we had a seal failure. That was it. So a chunk of the seal actually came apart, and thus when it went to shift to third gear, we had no pressure on the clutches, so they kind of free spun, or we had minimal pressure, not the pressure we should, and that's what burned up our clutches. So that was what happened to our transmission. It's not a fault of the guys at Muldoon's. It's just one of them kind of freak things, maybe a bad seal or whatever, but I was there when John put the transmission together, if you guys remember way back when, and John checks every one. They put it on, I think it's on the pump or whatever, wherever they put it on, and then they air check it, and you can actually see the clutches rise, and you can check the clearance to make sure you have the proper clearance in there and all that, and that they're coming up as much as they should. So if it had been a Muldoon's issue, then you would have seen that right away because it would have had a cut seal, would have pulled it back apart and taken care of it. But needless to say, I am ecstatic. I was thinking for sure we had a sprag issue in the rear of the transmission. So we're launching a manual first, which is supposed to kind of cure that because our low reverse sprag or low reverse band is applied. But when this thing came off the trailer, it sounded like marbles, which was because our converter bolts came loose. I feared for the worst, and I thought we were going to need a case and all kinds of stuff. Here, we just needed some clutches, and we've been waiting on our converter to come back from Suncoast. So, converter is already on our Sancher Performance Development input shaft, that solid input shaft for this 48RE. Our transmission's freshened up by the guys at Muldoon's, who have actually switched their process a little. And they've gone to an epoxy paint on this thing, and man, this thing just looks dynamite. Definitely a great coating on there. I think John said you can spill gasoline on it, stuff like that, won't ruin the paint, which honestly, I wouldn't care if they painted it anyway, but it looks phenomenal. So that's tonight's job. Get the transmission in, get the torque converter bolted up, all that kind of stuff. We do have our new Suncoast flex plate, which is a 12 bolt flex plate. So we have 12 bolts on our flex plate now to go with our 12 bolt converter. We got rid of our other flex plate, and also we're going to make one other change to our process. So the other change we're going to make is a recommendation by Strictly Cummins on Instagram. Definitely go check him out. He definitely posts some of the coolest and best Cummins content on Instagram. He recommended, I guess they had problems with their pulling truck, he recommended switching to a 2620 Loctite. This is more of like a paste. Normally I used red liquid Loctite, so we're going to take that and add it with our 12 bolts for our new flex plate, and hopefully we have no more converter bolt issues and we will be good to go. Now, that all being said, we're getting to the end of the year. we're hopefully going to be able to run the truck once or twice more, you know, at Cecil, actually get a quarter-mile pass out of this thing. We've only done the 8th mile at Emerald Coast, but I want to run it some more so we can find out if we need to make any more winter changes, but also just to run the truck. You guys know this thing's been down for quite a while, and all I want to do is just run this sucker. I just want to get it down the track and just see what you'll do. And I want to clip off 1019 is the fastest this truck's ever been. I want to do at least a 9, but if we dip, you know, another digit lower into the 8s, I would be ecstatic. So anyway, enough jibber jabber. Let's get this transmission in, bolt it up, and that way we can get this thing full of fluid and moving under its own power once again. All right, so our transmission is in. Honestly, I kind of started putting the trans in, and then I forgot about the camera, got it up and in place, and I started putting the cross member in, and once again forgot about the camera and just started going about my business. So everything is done. The trans is bolted up. All of our wiring connections are in for our sensors, for our anteater, all that. Our cooler lines, they're hooked up. Everything's out of the way. Our transmission cross member is in and looking good. We did have a little issue with that, which I'll go into in a second. Our rear drive shaft's in. Our front drive shaft is in. Like I said, sorry for the lack of footage. I just kind of got into it and was just kind of, well, I didn't think about the camera. So anyway, our rear cross member that we created, I said we had a little issue. So our little issue was that when I pulled, released the tension on the jack, the transmission wasn't actually sitting on it. So the transmission mount, let me get in here and see. So our transmission mount right back there, our transmission mount was not sitting on our cross member the way it should. Normally when I come off the jack, it sits down on the cross member, and we didn't have that. It was actually staying up, and it took me quite a while to figure out what was going on, because I'm like, oh, we need a new cross member, all this, and I'm like, well, still, it doesn't make sense, because if I didn't have my jack high enough, I still couldn't get the cross member in. So it's not like our cross member was sitting that low. I just couldn't figure it out, and then I came to a big realization. And that realization is we put our bellows for our intercooler piping in while the transmission was out. So what we found out when we did our hood stack mod, when we pinned it so it doesn't rotate anymore, we needed to have the engine how it should be, so we put our mock-up transmission in. Well, during that same, before we got to that, we put these bellows in. So I actually unbolted the intercooler, which you can see. It moves now because our bellows are there to give us a little spring. And as soon as I did that, the transmission laid on the cross member the way it should. So I haven't really messed with this. What I'm hoping we can get away with is just being able to loosen our V-band clamps and tilt the intercooler back a little more, and that way we'll be able to get our bolts back in. Otherwise, we're gonna have to modify our piping, but that was holding the whole thing up. Our bellows didn't want to expand. Part of the reason I actually put these turnbuckles in, so Some people, after we put the bellows in, contacted me. People who know a lot more about this and have been around high horsepower stuff before said these bellows might kind of distort and not do exactly what I want. As you can see, they are flexing, so they're doing that. But I guess they could get all out of whack is kind of how I took it. So I kind of thought on that, and well, we had the bellows already in, so I made this turnbuckle basically. Basically, it's a piece of all thread, 2 Heim joints, so that should allow everything to flex, but it won't allow this thing to expand, because once it expands, that's when it wants to get all out of sorts and all that. BD Diesel actually makes something similar. It's like a boot lock kit or something like that. So what it is actually, if you have boots on like your intercooler and your intercooler piping, you can put their kit, which is similar to this, except it has a quick disconnect. So if you have to take the boot off, you can. They have that, and I was like, that's a great idea, but we don't need the quick disconnect. We just need a little extra strength to our bellows. So anyway, that's where that idea came from. But after we solved that issue, we moved forward, got everything all bolted up, and then I actually spent a whole bunch of time trying to figure out my ratchet shifter linkage. So on the ratchet shifter, there is a pawl, like where your factory shift pawl would go. That your factory shifter, when you would pull it down, would move. There's one of those, and it has a hole in it. And then on the end of the cable, end of this cable for the ratchet shifter, when you move the ratchet shifter back and forth, it moves this pin. Well, I couldn't get the pin to line up because I kept trying to do it in park, which is incorrect. So you want to do that in gear, and once I did that and figured that out, then everything was good. So wasted a lot of time on that stuff, and yeah, so this is taking way longer than it should, and I'm way out of practice to put the transmission in this truck. I think over the course of winter, maybe a couple times we should pull it out for practice. What do you guys think? I'm probably actually not going to do that. Anyhow, everything is done except for bolting up the torque converter with our 12 bolts to that Suncoast flex plate and our Suncoast converter, and filling the truck with fluid. But with those couple holdbacks, it has gotten late. It is a school night, and it has gotten rather cold here in the garage. It is getting to be, well, it's not getting to be. It's winter's just about here in Pennsylvania, as far as I'm concerned. That's why I really want to just get this in, so that way if we have an opportunity to get it to Cecil, we can. So anyway, we'll pick this up tomorrow, get our Suncoast converter all bolted up, and get this thing full of fluid so it will once again move under its own power.